Okay, so I'm going to go over a couple of things that we worked on regarding our project. So what I have here on the screen is this little motif that we worked on a little bit. And the reason I'm going to make this video is because we were using several different tools within the program to create this simple little shape. Now, when you first look at it, you may think, oh, I can see what happened there. It was just using one of the motif stitches that is built into the program, and you used the circle layout tool to create it. And yes, that is true, but we also used a couple of other features in the program to help make this into a better design. So let me go ahead and explain what I am talking about. First of all, we are going to I think what I'll do here is I will hide everything else that's on the screen so that we only see this little motif. So I'm going to hide unselected, all right? Everything else is still there. If we were to look up in our sequence bar, we would see that the design is still there. I have not deleted it, but we're just focusing on how we created this little circle design. We came up into the digitize toolbox and we use the motif stamp. And when I turn that on, remember that we will always start off in alphabetical order of all of the different motif sets that are part of the program. Black work is always number one, and then because I've been using my program for a long time and I have created lots of different motifs, I've got a lot in here. But what we're going to do right now is we're going to go ahead and scroll on down until we get to single motifs. And that's going to be somewhere up in here because I wasn't focusing. Single motifs. You're going to see here also on my screen that I've got a single motif altered. So what that is different times when I have wanted to use one of the built-in stitches from the single motifs and I've changed them a little bit. I've put them into their own category, which is something that you can do as well. All right, let's work on a single motif. We're going to turn on this little lip icon up here because then that lets us see this in a true view. And we're going to scroll down until I find the little circle number 3 that we used. And I'll say OK. Now remember, when it comes up, you can see here on the screen that we see just a little outline of what the stitch looks like. Just letting you know that at this point I have let go of my mouse as I have just moved it over here into position. I think I'll put it about right there. And what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to hit my enter key. And did you hear that click? I turned on my mouse sound so that you would be able to hear them. And I'm going to now hit escape. Oh, I didn't do that right. Let me try. What happened here actually was that I had turned off the way I have my program set right now is it's recording sounds and I needed to light up my screen. Anyway, all right, so there it is where I want it. I'm going to hit the enter key and now I'm going to hit escape so that I only have one of those little motifs. I'm going to go ahead and select it and I'm going to change the color to blue so it looks a little bit different than the one that's already on screen. All right, so the next thing that we wanted to do was create this little flower shape. There's a lot of different ways that we could do this. And what I'm going to demonstrate is I'm just going to pull this up here and I'm going to go ahead and come on into our Create Layouts toolbox. I'm going to find the circle layout. And when I turn that on, you're going to see what happened on the screen is I've now got the design with the little shadow effects and the spokes showing me what it would look like if I created this into a little circle layout. I'm going to wiggle around a little bit here and just show you that up here on the top, a little context toolbar has opened up, which tells me that right now I'm set for 5 repeats. And I'm just going to leave it at that. But if I wanted to change it, I would just hit the arrow and I could scroll up or down and I could do as many as I wanted in here, okay? So we'll keep it at 5. Now, see the little center point? That is where everything is rotating around this. And depending on the original position of this motif, it's going to affect obviously the layout of how these repeats are created. So I can do whatever I want with them. You know, I can, what I want you to notice, I guess, is that I'm going to hit escape. Notice what this looks like. Notice where the pivot point is at in the center and notice the little spokes, okay? Because that's really important for how this is going to be created. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to hit my enter key right now, and I'm going to create this design. All right. Looks a little bit different than this one, which is fine. But the point that I wanted to make was that when I had this selected and the little spokes came up, the pivot point was here in the middle, and the spokes came out to the way I had it oriented to the center of this little circle design. All right, so that's the effect that I got right here. I was paying close attention to those spokes. Let's make another one. Let's go ahead, and I think what I'll do is I'll just copy this one right here. It's this one right here. I'm going to right click and I'm just going to drag it out. Change the color to yellow so it looks a little bit different. We'll do the same thing again. We'll go ahead and turn on our circle layout. Notice what I'm talking about. We've got a pivot point. We've got spokes that are showing us where these little circles are in relationship to one another. Okay, so I can just drag this however I want. The point that I want you to notice in a little while is that depending on how we position these in relationship to one another, we are going to get connectors. All right, so we talked about connectors in our little session yesterday. And what are they? You're not going to see any connectors in here right now. What connectors are is it is showing us where one object ends and where the next one begins. So let's select this right now. I'm going to turn off my true view. And when we zoom in on our true view, I want you to remember that a little tiny circle, and you can see a little tiny circle right here, that's where the object is beginning. That's the tie-in. And where we've got a little triangle, that is showing where the object has finished. That's the end point. Where you see this long dotted line, that's showing me that this is object number one, and the next one in the sequence is this one. There's the tie-in for it. So the point I'm making is that after this motif has stitched, it has finished off right here, and then the machine is going to jump all the way over here to begin the next motif. All right, the position is in the same spot on this one that it was on this one here. Now, when we are creating our embroidery, we always want to try to avoid having jumps. Jumps slow down our stitching time. Jumps also sometimes create little blobby stitches where the tie-offs happen. It adds stitches into the design. It slows down the design time takes to stitch. So oftentimes we want to try to eliminate those little things. And there's a lot of little things that we can do to try to create a nice, smoother embroidery. So right here, you're seeing this jump. Okay, over here in our show tab up on this top toolbar, if we do the drop down on here, lots of different little things that we can choose to see on our design screen. Some of these things only show up or will show up better whether we are in true view or whether we're in design view. Right now I'm going to turn on needle points. So if you might have noticed when I turned on needle points, the design changed a little bit, and all of a sudden you could actually see little white dots. Now, I'm going to turn them off. Keep your eye on the screen. Little white dots went away. Now, you know, there's another option that we have here that I'm going to talk about briefly. And what that is actually is, I'm going to select off of here, is the fact that in our design settings, when we look at our background and display colors, there's a lot of things that we can change to suit ourselves. Now, one of the things I want to talk about right now is because I was just talking about showing those little needle points, we've got a choice here about what color we want those needle points to look. So right now mine are set for white. That's the default, I believe, in this program. I'm going to set them right now for a different color so that we can see them. Let me say I want them to be black. I don't think I'll use any black in this design. Okay, so now when I have my needle points selected, you're going to see all of those little black dots. Okay, that'll just help us a little bit in this demonstration. Now the connectors, what are the connectors? If I turn this off, what do I want to do right now? If I turn off the connectors, that will show us where that long jump is at. It's just another word for a jump. So let's turn on our true view and let's turn on our show tab and let's show our connectors. I'm hoping that as I move out here, computer's getting a little bit laggy. Hmm. Connectors are not showing on this one right here, but they are showing up here on this blue circle tool. Where are the connectors? It says little jump from here to here. Now you can see that because of the way that I created this particular design. You're seeing that the connectors are coming from here to here. It would start this new circle and it would stitch it out. It would end here and it would jump over here. So what I'm going to do is just concentrate on this blue one here. I'm going to turn off all the others. I'm going to turn this one off, hide it. And I'm going to hide this other little pink one. Actually, I'll do is the blue, I'm going to hide everything else. Unhide, hide the unselected. Okay, now I just see this. What am I going to do? What I want to do is I want to turn on the player and we can watch this stitch. All right, so we just watch it go around and round. It's going to finish there and it went quickly, but you saw where it jumped, right? Jumped. Okay, so that's what we're going to work on a little bit here. I'll go ahead and stop it. So it's completed there. And what we're going to work on is two different ways that we can eliminate a little jump there. There may be actually more than that, but right now I'm just thinking about two. Now, the first one would be that we want to make sure that these little pieces are put together in a sequence that is a logical direction for them to stitch in. Now, one of the things that happens with this little circle layout tool is that sometimes it puts them in a funny order. So let's look at these as objects. Where are they? Let's scroll on down to find the blue ones. All right, let's just select them here and there and see what the order is in. 1, 2, it's going in it's going in clockwise order according to this. So you know what? That's not bad. Sometimes it puts them like maybe it'll go counterclockwise depending on where our pivot point was at, how we positioned it. Sometimes it may even do the somewhat out of order. This one wasn't bad, so we'll just leave them there. However, if we really wanted this to stitch out in a certain order, let's just say instead of this one being the first one, we wanted this one to be the first one. I'm just going to show you a little tip about reorganizing our objects. I'm going to select them here. I'm holding down my control key on my keyboard, and I'm just going to click on them in the order that I want them to stitch. All right, it's not very different from what they were originally, just to demonstrate. Now down here under the bottom of the sequence bar, we've got this 1, 2, 3. I'm going to let go of my control key now that I've got all of those selected, and I'm going to hit 1, 2, 3, and it reorganized them in the order that I want them to stitch in. All right, the next thing that we can do is we can select all of these objects, and we can come up into our Edit Objects toolbox, and we can say that we want to apply the closest join. Now, little subtle changes may have happened there, but one thing that we may look at is that maybe they were already at the place where they were the closest join. What that means is where one would have finished and the next one would have began, it would have, tried to move the start-stop point of those objects. Not much happened here, but I just want to say that sometimes using closest join will solve all the problems of getting rid of some of the jumps. This one here is not a good demonstration of that. And I did that deliberately so that we can then use this other tool to create a closest join. Now remember, when this particular object finished, let's go ahead and take a look at it. Turn on the reshape tool. We can see this green diamond is where the design begins. And we can see this little tiny red cross right here is where the design ends. And then we know that if we select this one here, this is where it's beginning, and the other one's where it's ending. So we're going to be able to create a little run line right through here that's going to be a real simple way of fixing this design, giving us a better stitch out. Just keep in mind where that start and stop is at. Easy to see it because we've also got the connector turned on. So what we'll do now is we will close this toolbox and we will open up our digitize toolbox, and we'll come over to our digitize open shape. Make sure that we are using a single run. At this point, if we wanted to change the stitch length to something different right here in our stitch settings, we could do that. And just a little tip, if we really wanted to make sure that it matched up perfectly in appearance with what was already on here, we could actually measure that stitch. Maybe I'll show you that. Okay, we're going to turn on our measuring toolbar by hitting M on our keyboard. And let's measure. Let's just take a look at one of the stitches. This one right here shows pretty well. From there to there, 1.28 millimeters. It's a pretty short stitch. This is built into the motifs and I have not changed the size any. So I'm going to hit the escape key and we're going to notice that when we digitize an open shape, single run, the length right now is set at 2.5, but if I wanted it to be exactly like this, I could change this by typing in what I want. I'm just going to leave it as it is right now. Let's go ahead and digitize a little line. Single run, we're going to start right here. That's a left click. Here's a right click for a curve. And here is a left click for an ending point. Okay, hit my enter key. And that little line has been created. Here it is right here at the bottom of my sequence bar. What do I want to do with it? I want to move it up so that it's going to stitch right after this object and before this one. So I'm just going to grab it and I'm going to, holding down my key, my mouse, and let's find this spot. It's jumping a little bit too much. Okay, so now, did you notice that connector ran away? Pretty snazzy, right? Okay, so we would do the same thing with each one of these little objects. I could create another one just to show you again. Digitize open shape. I have to turn the tool back on again because it turned off when I came over to the sequence bar and I moved that. All right, so let's do another one. Left click, right click, enter. All right, you can still see the connector. What are we going to do? We're going to grab it. We're going to move it up. I went too far. Where did I put that? Sometimes it's easier to, let me do an undo there. Probably would have been easier for me to, yeah, I totally lost it. Okay, let's do another one. Sometimes when these things are too big, we grab them and move them and it's not a good thing. Digitize, open shape, do it again. All right, grab it. Let's just use the arrow here to go up one at a time. Little safer. And there we go. Oop, went too far. Go down one. Keep an eye here to show that the connector disappears. All right, we've got it in the proper position. Another thing that I want you to notice is that when we come over into the object properties of that little stitch that's selected here in our sequence bar, when we look at the stitching tab, we're going to see that we've got tie-ins here. That means that it's actually going to make little knots. We don't need them. And I want you to notice down here under our stitch count, right down here under our contact, our little toolbar down here, it's a status bar. I turn these off. We will maybe notice that we've got stitches. Sometimes will change when we turn off those little doodads. Okay, so this one here, the tie-ins, I think they're already turned off because a little while ago when I used the closest join, it took away those little tie-ins and tie-offs that might have been built in. All right, so the point is that was one way of making little run lines in between your objects to get rid of the jumps, also known as connectors. All right, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to undo everything that I've done. So now I can see my connectors popping back up again. Probably would have been easier to delete them. Okay, all my connectors are back. See them all there? Only what I don't see one in is this one, and the reason why is because this was the last in the sequence, so it did not need to connect to this first one that was stitching out. I'm going to show you another way now of creating some little connectors. And this is actually the way, one time or another, one of those will work best for you. So this is a handy tool. This one here only works when we don't have the true view turned on. So we have to turn true view off so that we're just seeing this in the design view. And again, we can still see where our connectors are at. So using the home key on your keyboard, if I turn, I think what I'm going to do, I'm going to change the design color of this first of all. Reason why, yeah, I think I'm going to Yeah, I will, because there a little while ago when I turned my stitch points on to black and this design here is blue, the reason why is because I have a setting in my design settings. One of the things we'll look at again is that when we are looking at things in this tip tool that I'm going to be showing you now, which is traveling through the design, um, my unsewn stitches, I have them set for this royal blue color. That's going to make sense to you in a second. So I'm going to just demonstrate this to you right now. My unsewn stitches are in navy blue and my stitch needle points are in black. So when we look at this really closely, they look kind of similar in their coloration, right? So my design was blue. I used blue thread on it. My unsewn stitches are also blue, so that's too close of a color contrast. What I'm going to do is change the color of this to, I think I'm going to change it to this burnt orange color. I'm going to actually unhide this, and I'm going to get rid of it. I'm going to delete it. We don't get confused here. This is the last thing now that has been sewn on my design. Another little tip I want to just mention is that whenever you see this little maze box right here, that is an indication of the last object that has been created. That's where it ends. Whenever you see that, that's what that means, okay? I know I'm talking about a lot of little things in the program right now, but anyway, hopefully that helps. All right, so back to what I was going to demonstrate to you. When I hit the home key on the keyboard, my design turns blue. Now that's the reason why I needed to change the color of my design, was because I wanted to show you home key is showing that this design has not been stitched. In other words, it's not showing as stitched objects. It's just showing as the shapes and the needle points that are being created here. We're going to travel through this design. Now there is a traveling toolbar that you can use here in the program, but what I want to do right now is I want to travel through stitch by stitch. So my design is turned on. What I want you to do now is notice that I'm going to hit, using the arrows on my keyboard, I'm going to hit the forward arrow. That's the one that's pointing to the right. And when I click on it, let's see, you see this little maze box that's coming over here. I'm going to hit, oh, something else is showing on the screen. That's irritating me. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to escape. I'm going to move this up to the very first object in the sequence bar. I'm just going to use this button to quickly get it there. Also would have worked for me to just do this on a different screen. What I want to do now is I'm going to turn my home key back on again, hit my forward arrow, and it's going to start walking through this design stitch by stitch by using the little forward button on my keyboard. Also know that the arrow that points downward will jump by 10 stitches. I think it's 10. It might be 5. I think it's 5. All right, so that's a quicker way to get around. But I'm just going to use my single one for now. Point is what I want to do is I want to get to exactly this point where this object finishes stitching, okay? And it's right here. If I hit one more time, it's going to jump to the next object. We want to eliminate the jump, remember? Now I'm going to use the backwards arrow. That's the one that's pointing to the left on my keyboard. I'm going to go back up. I'm going to turn on digitize an open shape. I'm going to make sure my single run is selected and I'm going to draw. Here's a left click, a right click, and a left click. All right, hit the enter button. What we're going to notice now is that if I'm in objects up here, we're going to see that it actually put that stitch right where it needed to be in between object 1 and object 2. Isn't that handy? This is also a technique that they call seeding. Seeding, like planting a seed, you're planting stitches within the object. So let's continue on. Let's use the forward arrow, or let's stitch the next object. And I'm just going stitch by stitch. I could jump by 5, but I'm going the slow method. Here we are at that one. My digitize open shape is still turned on. You see my little maze box. And I'm just popping my stitches in there. Hit my enter button and there it is, seated right into the space where it needs to be. So that is 2 different ways of adding in the stitches to connect your objects to give you a better stitch out. And I think that those are both really handy little tips. Now, if let's pretend like I've got them all stitched out. I could, maybe I should just go ahead and finish it up, right? Let's see, we're almost to the end. So depending on how you position those motifs, will be depending on the best way to get this done. I think I might have gone too far. Let's go back let's go forward. We're almost to the end there. So, using your little scroll on your mouse to zoom in and out is needed. Remember, this is really tiny. It's not very big, so we don't need to be super concerned about getting that point exactly right on target. And this one here is not going to need one, so we're just getting to the end here, and this is where the object is going to end. So I can just come on up to my keyboard and I can hit the end button on my keyboard. Now these are the home button and the end buttons are the ones that are right above your numerical keypad on your keyboard, in case you're wondering about that. All right, so we have eliminated all the jumps here. I'm going to hit escape here. Let's go ahead and turn on the stitch player and let's watch it stitch. See that? So instead of having all kinds of little jumps, etc., we just have created some little run lines in between that are making this a much nicer little motif. Now that this design has been created, I would suggest if it's something that you're going to use somewhere else in your project, that you would go ahead and save this as its own little individual design. Now remember that one of the things you might want to do is take it off of this page. I'm going to select everything. I'm going to come up to my keyboard and I'm going to cut it. I'm going to open a new page right here. I'm going to paste it in this new page. Now it's way down over here in the corner because it's pasted into the same position that it was at on the previous page. I'm going to click off of it and I'm going to use the center button right here and it's going to center it in at the 0, 0 axis. All right, and let's go ahead and save this little design. What am I going to call it? I don't know what I'm going to call it. I'll figure that out in a bit. Output design, save design as. This is the folder that we're creating our project in, and I'm going to call it Circle 2. Just going to type in that name there. And I will say, okay, remember that it is saving it as an EMB, which means that this is the original object file, which means that in the future, whenever I decide I want to open this design up again, I've got the complete liberty of being able to change the size of it, and it will be recreated with really excellent stitch properties so far as stitch lengths are concerned and all of that kind of stuff. So this is a really neat way of creating a nicely stitched out design. Now, something else I want to do now with this little design is I want to save it as a motif. Now, why would I might want to do that? Because, and I'm not going to guarantee that this particular one will run well as a motif pattern because of where the design stops and starts, but I want to use this somewhere and I want to use it as a fill pattern. So what am I going to do with it? I'm going to first of all draw a box around it. I'm going to right click here on it and I'm going to group it together. So it's all grouped together as one object. You're going to see those little symbols here in the corners. All right. What I want to do with it is I want to turn it into a motif. And my motif button isn't showing here. Oh, I want to get rid of this travel toolbar. I'm going to come up to Window. Under Toolbars, I'm going to get rid of travel because I don't use it very often. Takes up space. Okay, so something that I had to do was I had to turn off that travel toolbar because the size of my machine, my screen on my computer doesn't allow all the toolbars to be open. And that one was taking up some space, so the one I wanted to use wasn't showing. And it's the one where we've got the option to do some lay down stitches or to create a motif. So it's up here in the upper right hand corner on my screen. It may be in a different spot on your screen. So once my design has been selected, it is grouped together. I'm going to come to motif turn it on, and I've got some different categories of things that I've created. I think what I'm going to do is I'm just going to leave it in this category here. If I wanted to make a new, you know what, maybe I will make a new category. All right, remember a little while ago when I was showing you my motif categories? I had a whole bunch. This is how you do them. So just for fun, I'm going to make a new category and I'm going to call it circles. Okay, and I will say okay. And this one here, remember a little while ago when I saved it, I called it circle 2. So I'm going to give it that same name here. I'm not going to use any spaces because that takes up space here. Circle 2, I will say okay. The next thing that pops up is down on the bottom over on the status bar of my screen here. It says to enter the start point of the reference line. Now, the reference line is just, when you start using this as a shape in the program, it's going to be based on whether or not it's in the middle of the design, at the bottom, or the top of the design, or somewhere in between. I'm just going to do at the beginning right here, hold down my control key to keep a straight line, and come to this spot here. It's been created in the category of circles, okay? So that means that I now have created this little object, and I have saved it, not just as a design element, but I have saved it as a motif that I can later use as a fill pattern. I'm going to demonstrate that real quickly here before I end up this video. We're going to digitize let's just say I'm going to digitize a circle because we've used circles before and we're using lots of circles here. Now I want to make a symmetrical circle right now. So I'm just going to click one time in the middle, draw out my circle to make the radius of the circle. And I'm going to hit my enter key 2 times. And I've got a huge filled circle. So this one here is what I've got. It's filled, but I want to use a motif. I'm going to come down into my categories and I'm going to find one that I just created, which was called circles, right here. I only have one thing in there, and it's this one right here. So I select it, and you can see that my circle filled in with that little motif everywhere. Isn't that kind of cool? Now, I'm not going to vouch for how the quality of that stitch out is going to be because the reason why is because I know I'm going to have a bunch of jumps between one motif and another motif. And that could be worked out later too. But I just wanted to show you one of the reasons why you might want to create this little circle and make it into a motif. Now, we could play with these things all day long, but right now we can see that the width of my motif is almost 26 millimeters. We're looking in the bottom right-hand corner here. The height of it is also, it's a very symmetrical little design. If I wanted to play with the way that it's laid out, now you can see that they look like they're in rows. See that? I could play with the layout here. I could change the angle. It's rotating a little bit because it's selected. And I could actually move my row and my offsets. So let's just say I want to change the offset. Just watch this. I'm going to change it to half of that width. Half of 25 is about, what, 12.5, more or less. And you're going to see that my designs kind of shifted a little bit. There's another way that I can actually do this. I can select this. I can reshape it. I could do all kinds of different things to it. Okay, anyway, I just wanted to show you those few things about, first of all, how we created this little circle shape to use somewhere in our design, how I showed you how to get rid of the little jump stitches and the connectors in 2 different ways, and how we then created that motif to be used as a fill pattern in a closed object. Another thing that we can do with it, I'm going to escape from here, and I'm going to show you this. So we could also do this as a little line object. We're going to create a digitized open shape. We're going to make a motif line, and see, my design is already selected here. We'll work with motifs again in a future lesson. I'm just going to draw a straight line. Oh, maybe I'll draw a curved line. All right, let's look at that in view. Actually, let's look at it in not true view. See all the little jumps here in between? That would go to show that we would need some real work on this. But there we've used that same motif as a cute little motif line. All right, couple of cool tips using Hatch 3, working on our circle project. This is Fabi. Thanks for watching the video. Bye for now.